I had a psychology degree and I was like, oh, I don't need this self-help stuff. This is for, weak people who aren't very smart. God, again, loves to humble me. So I started like drinking at the fountain of personal development, and it made a huge shift in my life. And so once my mindset was that not only do I have to save myself, but I actually can. Once I started really believing that I could, and it wasn't, I can't, it's not, I'm just going to find somebody else to save me. Like I can figure this out. I'm going to have to figure this out. I can figure this out. Once I decided I was going to be that person, I was like, okay, so what are we doing here? And finally sat down, made a real plan, hired a better attorney, got, that was a whole story in and of itself, but trying to find new legal counsel with not a lot of money, not a lot of influence and things like that. And once I really got that plan going, it was like, okay, once I decided to save myself and apply that kind of methodology to it, things shifted instead of it just being this like shotgun approach where I was like, who's gonna save me? We're mastering the art of living.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the Rush Outrospective, a Mastering the Art of Living podcast. Some stories arrive like storms, violent, disorienting, and loud. Others, like Christin Slough's, unfold as a steady light that refuses to go out. What she endured wasn't just a political ordeal or a media spectacle. It was a test of spirit, the kind that exposes what faith, love, and endurance really means when everything familiar falls away. When her husband, Paul, was sent to Iraq and later imprisoned as one of 4 veterans blamed in what the news headlines called the Blackwater Massacre, Christin's world shifted overnight. What followed were 13 years marked by courtrooms, her husband's unjust imprisonment, shifting narratives, and prayers that stretched far beyond moment. But beneath the public noise, there was a private reality. A mother raising a daughter, a wife holding a family together, a woman learning to stay whole while the world tried to pull her apart. The presidential pardons closed the chapter, but not the healing. And today we're not here to retell the controversy. We're here to understand the woman who carried hope through years that would have broken most people. Christin, it's awesome to have you on the Rush Outrospective, a Mastering the Art of Living podcast. I have to say, I'm very familiar with your family story. With regards to Raven 2-3 and how the Justice Department failed Americans heroes.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just really in touch with what y'all went through, and it's an honor to have you here. And I've always, as I said before to you, I've always wanted to have you on the podcast when I first had Paul on my podcast many years ago. So it's an honor to have you here today.
Well, thank you. Yeah, the whole, Blackwater issue is super interesting, but then kind of what happened on the back end at home inside your 4 walls is really interesting as well. And I look back at my life and I'm like, that is fascinating.
Yeah, it is a story in itself, and for a soldier spouse, soldier wife, is to see in this particular circumstance how penetrating it was for your lives. Before everything got loud, before the world ever knew both y'all's names for that matter, who was Christin in the quiet moments?
Man, I would say I was like, maybe still am, just like so average, just like so normal. I grew up in the suburbs not far from here in Carrollton. Went to public schools, was in the gifted and talented program, went and got my degree at Texas Tech University. And my life was what I would call just like altogether, just kind of normal and average until I met and married my husband, which was kind of quick. Like we were married within a year. And we were both in college, and I was not expecting him to go into the military. He had actually just left the military when we had met, and he was in the National Guard. And I figured he was, 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year until he was done. And that was not the case at all. Like we went on our honeymoon and came back to activation orders with the National Guard. So my life just took this crazy left turn, like the minute I married this man, and it kind of hasn't let up since.
It's funny. I have been through similar, where the similar circumstance where I got married before I was deployed, and so you open it up, you open that the can of worms, you don't know what you're going to get inside.
Yeah, we got no honeymoon phase. Oh, they're in the honeymoon. We got no honeymoon phase. We would jump straight into deployments, and then he came home. And he finished his National Guard deployment, and he kind of, for about, 6 months, was trying to figure out like what's next with my life. And we talked about going back into the military, but, didn't want to commit for 8 years, didn't want to make me a post wife because I had just gotten my degree and we didn't want to bounce around from post to post. I wanted to be able to establish a career. And so he went to a veterans career fair and was recruited by Blackwater. Because what he would be doing with Blackwater, some of those jobs overlapped with what he had been doing for the National Guard, convoy support and security and advanced security. So when he was recruited by Blackwater to do that job, it was a job he already wanted to do, but you only had to sign a year contract instead of 8, and they paid you more. You came home more. Like, it was altogether just a better situation. So then he went back overseas with Blackwater in Iraq, and then you know what happened from there. He ended up in this hugely political situation. So we went straight from deployment to another deployment to legal strife, which has followed us, the entire time until 2020 when he was pardoned by the president. But you don't just wake up and that's over, right? Yeah. So your whole life just kind of ends up revolving around this extraordinary incident.
Yeah, that's crazy. In the intro, I said something about the presidential pardons close a chapter, but not the healing. Is that a true statement?
Yeah, I would say that it was almost like going from the frying pan into the fire because, leading up until that point, at least for me personally, so when Paul was in prison, that was a horrible situation for him that he had to face every day. But for me, it was my daughter and I, and we had, a lot of peace inside of our home. It was just the two of us, and it was really it was like the fight was out there, but the home was peaceful. And then when my husband came home from prison, he had a lot of stuff to deal with, right? Yeah. He had gone straight from combat into legal stress into being incarcerated. That's a really violent, horrible place. You just don't walk away from that and be like, oh, I'm so grateful that I'm free, that I don't have any bad feelings about this. Nothing happened to me. A lot of things happened. And so taking that turmoil that had existed outside the house and kind of brought it into the house because we had not been parenting together. He had left for prison when she was 1.5 years old and came back when she was 8. So I'd been parenting her. And, there's no book on just jumping back into your family after being gone for 6 years and having literally 10-minute-a-day phone calls. Yeah. There's no book on that. So we had to really jump into it. I'd say for me, the hardest years were the after they came home years because it was just that moment by moment, us both trying to heal and navigate something that was so far beyond us. And even our own trauma responses and behaviors that hurt each other. We both knew oh, well, you're not doing this because you want to hurt me. You're doing this because you were in a really bad spot and you're trying to work through your own stuff. So there's no book on that either. It's recognizing hey, I'm not in a good position here and I'm not being treated well, but I understand why that's happening and I have compassion for it. Yeah. Very hard.
When everything around you erupted and the outside noise got overwhelming, right? In that situation, how did you hold your own voice?
Very imperfectly. So I would say for the first 2 years of him being in prison, I was just kind of in this big grief hole where I was just so sad. I mean, I was so sad and my life had been ripped away and I was just grieving this future I was never going to have because he'd been sentenced to 30 years. And that's just, your entire adult life, right? And so you're kind of left grieving this adulthood that you're never going to have. So that first couple of years when I was trying to kind of get people to hear the story, I just wanted people to hear the story. I didn't really want to talk about my experience or anything that I was going to. I'm very stoic. The people joking and say I've been told I'm the most open, closed off person you'll ever meet. I'm very honest, but I'm also very stoic and I'm not a big feelings sharer. And especially when things aren't going well. I'm, some people say misery loves company. My joy loves company. My misery wants to be silent. So I was really quiet on my own personal level for the first couple of years, but I was out there also emailing or calling any media person who would listen, any congressperson who would listen, any of our legislators, anybody with any influence at all who I thought could potentially help. So it was constantly looking for help, but definitely not talking about my experience. And I probably really haven't talked about my experience here until recently. Yeah. But after those first couple of years, things finally shifted for me once I kind of gained the confidence to really start going out there as myself and kind of instead of looking for somebody to come save me, spent the first couple of years okay, who's going to fix this? Who's going to step in and change this situation? Who's going to, be our savior? Who's got the influence and the money and the whatever to get these things done? And things really shifted for me after I, like I said, like gained that confidence to be like, you know what? No one's coming to save me. I'm going to have to figure this out. I'm going to have to figure out the money. I'm going to have to figure out the lawyer. I'm going to have to figure out who's got the influence to get this done. I'm just going to have to figure that out. And I think that that was a huge turning point for me, was deciding that I had to save myself.
Yeah.
Like shifting from looking for somebody else to save me to like, no, girl, you're going to have to sort this. Nobody's coming for you.
Wow, that saying, no one's coming to save you, is like going to resonate with me from this point forward, just from your story and how no one's going to come save you from the situation. You're going to have to you're going to have to kind of, as Paul says, stand up in your stirrups,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So you got to stand up in your stirrups and figure it out because, I kind of thought that, somebody else is going to have to figure this out. I'm just a normal person. This is beyond me. This is something that y'all did, this political thing that y'all are doing here. And then I was like, okay, no, that's not actually working. Nobody just wants to step in and fix my life. There are people who want to support, want to pray, want to help. They want to assist you, but nobody is going to take over your life for you. Like if I want my life back, I'm going to have to figure that out.
Yeah, during that time, you were in a season of motherhood, right? And uncertain. In seasons of motherhood, uncertainty hits differently. What did being a mom teach you about courage and grace when fear kept trying to move you into move into the room with you?
I would say probably the two biggest things on that is one, just children are a blessing from God. Children are a blessing. Children are a gift. Children are a treasure. And if God had not given me that gift before Paul went to prison, like, I'm not sure how that would have gone for me, because there were so many days that, like, the reason I put my feet on the floor is because I had a tiny human at home who had her feet on the floor. And if she had not been up and moving around the house, at 7 a.m., then probably neither was Christin, because I was like just in a really dark spot. And I was like living with my parents after my husband went to prison. I moved in with my parents and I had a good job. And so I could have probably just laid in the bed all day and like gone into a depression hole. But just the gift of her existence was huge in keeping me just like putting my feet on the floor every day. And then the second piece of that is not just choosing to survive because you have a tiny little human who's depending on you, but taking that extra step and choosing, like, you know what, we're going to thrive. I'm not going to let your childhood be stolen by people with bad intentions. We're going to thrive. We're going to experience joy. I'm going to leave this grief. Like, there's periods for grief in the first couple of years. She was 1.5, probably 3.5. So thank goodness toddlers don't remember much, but I was in a tough spot. And that was what really changed first is deciding to survive, and then second, deciding to thrive, and in not giving away more of our lives to the devil. Yeah. Like, you're not going to take more from me. I'm going to choose joy. We're going to choose to travel. We're going to choose to have a great time. We're going to choose to laugh, and we're not going to feel guilty about it. I really struggled with feeling guilt about. It's almost like survivor's guilt, right?
Yeah.
I think a lot of people in the military, especially the ones who have gone to combat, experience a ton of survivor's guilt.
Yeah.
And I had kind of that same weird guilt, like, he's in prison, I can't go enjoy myself. How dare I enjoy myself while he's suffering?
Yeah.
And so having to make that like active choice to experience joy and to give our daughter joy and for her to have as normal as possible of a childhood.
Yeah. That's crazy. I mean, just thinking out, I love the fact that you said I'm not gonna let the devil overtake this situation. And speaking of thriving, you've said many times, plan the work and work the plan. At what point did that stop being a strategy and start becoming something deeper, almost a lifeline?
Yeah, I have this corporate project management background, and I just call myself like a professional nerd. And I loved being a professional nerd, and I learned how to just manage projects, how to like figure out like, who are my stakeholders, who are involved in these things. Let's create a plan. We need to be at point A. We need to be at point B. Who are the people who are involved in that? What are the paths? And so I loved that from a professional standpoint. And once I was kind of handed this conundrum, so like I said, like those first couple of years, I was just, spraying everything everywhere. It was like the shotgun approach. It was like, everybody's getting an email. If their name crossed my mind at 2 a.m., we're sending an email. And I didn't have much of a strategy because I hadn't really come to that conclusion that I was going to save myself, right? I was just kind of like, who's going to save me? Any emails, any phone calls, anybody I could come up with. And then I had a huge mental changing point. I actually started a business on the side, a network marketing thing. I mean, this like I jokingly call it like one step above prostitution, because everybody knows like the girls who like do the selfies online and join my party and stuff like that. And I absolutely had the worst impression of it. But I found a lip color that I really liked, like a no smear lip color. It's kind of a cool thing. So I was like, oh, I'll do a few orders and then I'll just be done with it. And then I ended up getting sucked into this like cult so hard. And it was like the most, I call it like Texas A&M. I was like, it's a cult, but it's a really wonderful cult. And it's this company called Senegence, and like, it's a cult, but it's a really wonderful cult. And it just ended up taking off on me. And one thing they do in that industry is tons of personal development. So anybody who's ever signed up to, Advocare or, any of the multi-level marketing, anything, they're just always shoving personal development down your throat. So there was this huge shift that happened because I joined this thing that I had no intention of joining. God is so funny like that.
Yeah.
Did this thing because I had a real job. I didn't need to do that. And ended up being the thing that completely changed my heart. It changed my mentality. It changed my mindset.
That's crazy. Was there like one thing, like you said you did some self-help, but was there like something in one self-help book or phrase or anything that just made you like, it just all snapped, like clicked at one moment? You know what I mean?
I wish I had some like life-altering second or moment. But it was actually two women in particular. One of them was our vice president of sales. Her name is Leslie Boyd Bradley, and she comes from like a Tupperware dynasty. Like literally her parents are like at the top of the food chain for Tupperware, which is like they're like one of the pioneers of like this model. And she, in everything that she did, in every conversation, in every little downtime when she was introducing a new speaker or whatever, she just pumped so much life into us. She has a million little zingers that come up in my brain all the time, every day. Those little things that remind you that keep going. Nobody knows you better than you. Just all of these little things. And then the other person was Joni Rogers Conte. She's the one who owns the organization. And her story is really compelling. She grew up in Sapulpa, Oklahoma, in a little town. And just like a self-made millionaire, developed this $1 billion company. And she is one of those just like very type A. And she will tell you, if you have a problem that money will solve, you don't have a problem, you have an opportunity. And so I started looking at it like that. I'm like, you know what, money would open some doors here. So if do I have a problem or do I have an opportunity? I'm like, I guess I have a really big opportunity here. So we had to treat it like that. So I would say that that's probably one of my better zingers. And I've got a million of them. I'm sure some more will pop out. But if you've got a problem that money will solve, you don't have a problem, you have an opportunity. Like if health is a real problem, somebody dies, that's a problem. You can't make your bills, get to hustling.
Yeah. That's crazy. I need to write that. I need to carry a pen every time I have this.
Yeah, like, all right.
Zinger,
right for the pocket.
Yeah, seriously. That's crazy. That's amazing. I like that. What were the name of two individuals again?
So Leslie Boyd Bradley, and she does personal coaching. So you could like go find her on Facebook or whatever and get her to coach you. She's amazing. And then the owner of the company is Joni Rogers Conte, and she will kick your ass.
That's awesome.
Like she is an emotional kick in the ass, and I love that.
It's amazing. We have to give them a shout out. After all those years of noise, fighting and waiting, there had to be a day when everything finally got quiet, right? Went quiet. What did that silence feel like? Relief, heavy, or something else?
It took a long time to get there. So I kind of look back at when my husband came home. And like I said, I'm real stoic and I'm not somebody who shares my emotion. And I was very much in shock. Like I didn't cry. Like everybody else, when he comes in, is bawling. And people cry when they watch the video of the homecoming. And I'm not sure I've ever shed tears. Like I didn't shed tears that night. And it's still like, I feel like there's some little maybe piece of me that's all broken. Oh no. But like, it took me weeks after he came to even like shed a tear over it and to kind of let that like diehard survivor tough, like, cause I had to like live there for a long time, like for years. I mean, so the legal battle was 7 years. He was in prison for 6. So for 13 years, I was like armored up all day, every day.
Wow.
And I know you know what that's like just being like emotionally armored up because your situation is so tough. And like taking off those little pieces of armor is like a real process. And I wouldn't say that I really got to experience all of that so he came home in 2020 at the end of 2020. 2021 and 2022, we just like jumped back into life and just started like trying to figure it out because there's like no roadmap. There's no, you do this first and then you do this first and everything's going to be perfect. Like that's not life. So we jumped in and realized that we had a lot of problems to deal with. And instead of dealing with those problems, we were really busy. I mean, he's working, I'm working, we're going to events, we're really social people. We love to be involved in stuff. I've got nonprofits that I'm involved in. I'm on the board of this one and I'm raising money for this one. And we're just like busy, excited, engaged people who love our community. But we really needed to take a step back and deal with ourselves. And so we called it the nuclear option. Our marriage was completely on the rocks. I mean, it was just like something drastic had to happen at that moment. And God just gave him this inclination. He's like, prompted him to asked us if we wanted to move back to Florida, because my daughter and I had lived in Florida for about 6 months while he was away. And we had just loved that time. It had been a really nice time in our lives. So he invited us to basically move back to Florida. We called it the nuclear option. We sold our house. We just kind of bounced. All of our friends who were here and everything, we just kind of left. They were like, oh, you're moving to Florida. We're like, yes, next week. We were just gone. And then I would say we just made an agreement. We were going to do it, but work, school, and talk to each other. Sleep, rest. We weren't going to do any organization, no politics, no nonprofits, no nothing. We just relaxed. And it took me, honestly, probably a year to come down. But I would seriously go to the beach every day, drop my daughter off at school, leave my car in the parking lot, walk across the street to the beach, and spend hours listening to pods, listening to mostly to spiritual God, just figuring it out and having those times with God. So I spent hours at the beach, just honestly crying.
Yeah.
So it took me several years, and then even more time to actually allow my nervous system to calm down.
Yeah.
And to take that time to be like, hey, it's actually okay to have a few tears about this, to process the grief of what didn't happen in your life and what may still, and just deal with all of that.
Yeah.
So,
do you think that I always say you can be addicted to grief, or you can be addicted to the anxiety, the anxiety you keep going through, you know what I mean? You say, hold on to some. Do you think you can be addicted to that kind of emotion?
Sure. I think that at my harder times, when things are going really poorly in my life and I want to exercise some kind of control, I end up to-do listing myself, right? And running through my list of things. And so when things are sometimes settled, it's going and almost reaching for okay, what's wrong and what needs to be solved. And I actually probably see that more in my husband than I see it in myself, because I'm really conscious about my thoughts. It's taken me very long to get there. But over those years, learning mindset and things, capturing your thoughts and, making them obedient, I've gotten better at that over the years, but I can see him do it, especially when he's kind of stressed out and we're driving in the car and he'll just ask me some question out of the blue about some bill or some this or that. And I can tell he's just looking for things to be stressed about, or looking for things to solve or whatever. And I'm we can actually just let our minds rest.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the fact that you went to the beach and you just got into it, that's I think that's amazing. The beach is so healing, don't you think? It's the oceanic air and, the ocean sound and just being in God's sunshine.
Yeah. I was really kind of physically and emotionally sick at that point. I was super underweight. I wasn't eating well. I was jittery. My nervous system was so messed up from being in that fight or flight for so long. And not being able to set it down. And you don't just wake up one day and set those things down. Yeah. It's a real process of setting it down and picking it up, setting it down, picking it up, setting down little pieces and picking them back up again, because it's complex trauma, right? Yeah. It's not one thing that happened. It wasn't a single event that happened one night. It was a conglomeration of things that happened in my family and my understanding of the world and my understanding of the country, all of those things. Yeah. And digging through all of those various layers. And really the complexity of that. Because you think you've dealt with something and then something else crops up and you're man, I feel sick about this. And okay, why do I feel sick about this? And then taking it to God and having a lot of conversations at the throne.
Now that you mentioned God or Christ, how important was that both of y'all, serve one God together, and your relationship with Christ? How did that evolve in that process?
Man, so I grew up in the Presbyterian church, but I would say like it didn't take. And like I didn't develop that personal relationship with the Lord until much later in life. And so when I went off to college, like I stopped going to church. I was just kind of like the poinsettia and lily crowd. I'd go with my parents when I was home for holidays. But it's interesting because the Spirit always pressed on me. Like I would have those like tears well up behind my eyes, but I'm still like, okay, I don't know, whatever this God thing is about. I was like, this is something other people do. And like I kind of got it on a theoretical level. Like I didn't have anything against, like I'm like, okay, so y'all believe that, Jesus Christ came down and that he was, and I was like, I could get on board with that, but it didn't really have any meaning. So fast forward, I'm about 30. My husband had been like radically saved when he was 9, like, really had that experience in that relationship versus kind of this more like perfunctory confirmation and things like I had gone through. And he's like, look, I want to go back to church. I'm really struggling. Would you go back to church with me? And I'm like, I'll come support you. So God met me on a hay bale in a cowboy church in Keller, Texas, and like changed my life, changed my heart, like developed a relationship. But it hasn't been all sunshine and rainbows, right? Because like he saved me and I love the Lord. And then there have been some places where my life got so hard and so difficult. I'm like, oh, you've forgotten me. Oh, this isn't all it's cracked up to be. Where's your promises now? I'll just go do this on my own. Thank you very much. Your way sucks. I hate this. And so I've definitely like kind of like, just turned my back and been like, nope, I'm doing it on my own, and people say, you should just pray more. And I'm like, I'm going to punch you in the face.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like there are just some things that like, if you don't have that real relationship, and sometimes you just have to like walk through it, right? And figure out who you are at your worst. And like, sadly, I kind of got to figure out who I was at my worst. And who I was at my worst wasn't somebody who like prayed a lot. I had to like kind of meet myself there and then work through that with God later. So I would say that my relationship with God hasn't been about my strength at all. It's been completely about his strength being made perfect in my weakness and showing off my weaknesses to me and allowing him to show up and being like, hey, even if you're not perfect, even if you're not in control, even if you can't figure out everything yourself, like I'm here and I've got you. And if you'll just hang in there, trust me in all the things that I ask you to do, then you won't find yourself in these positions where you're reaping the consequences of just acting too fast or taking things under your own accord and all of those things that we do when we're like, I've got this. Thanks so much. Your way sucks.
Yeah, that's crazy. Forgiveness. Forgiveness is one of those things people talk about easily until they actually have to walk it out, right? How did you find your way towards forgiveness without pretending what the cost? The cost wasn't real.
I guess forgiveness kind of depends on like who you're mad at. And I've weirdly never been mad at these government players. You know what I mean? Because, if you're looking at prosecutors in a case like this, if that prosecutor doesn't say, okay, they're just going to replace it with somebody else, right? Like it doesn't really, to me, like matter that Vice President Joe Biden went to Iraq and promised them convictions on a news conference. I don't have any ill will against this guy. He's got a lot of things going on. Like that's for God to deal with. So I never even felt like I had to actually forgive these people. Paul feels differently. I mean, he went to an actual factual prison. Like they took away his life.
Yeah.
And they took away the opportunity for him to raise his daughter from 1.5 to 8. So he has those, like that kind of forgiveness journey. For me, I never even needed to forgive those people. I'm like, whatever, you're just cogs in the wheel. Like this is a systemic issue. This is our destiny. But where I've really had to learn forgiveness was myself and my husband. So, coming home and being in a tough spot, I wasn't always treated like I wanted to be treated. And in response, I didn't treat him like I really wanted to treat him. And so we both have transgressed against each other and those traumas and those trauma responses in those moments, and working through forgiving both of us for our responses.
Yeah.
It's hard. And that's something that like, because it's like an intimate relationship, forgiveness, it's like something you kind of have to deal with all the time. And like you kind of pick up and put down and pick up and put down. But being somebody who's like completely dedicated to your partner, like I am completely dedicated to forgiveness and he's completely dedicated to forgiving me too.
Yeah.
So, but Yeah, that takes longer. And that's intimate relationship forgiveness is much different than like these conceptual relationships, because I'm never going to run into Joe Biden.
Yeah.
Like this is never going to run up for me, but I'm going to run into that man at dinner tonight. And so we're going to have to like figure out how to forgive each other for the things that we did when we weren't feeling well.
Yeah. That's a amazing way to look at it too, right? Would you say the relationships, you're never going to run into Joe Biden and have any meaningful relationship with it?
Yeah, I could give these people to God. I'm like, God's vengeance is much better than mine anyways. I'm mostly just like a lot of talk and the middle finger. But like God has a lot more tools in his tool chest. So I'm like, I'm going to give you all to God and he's going to deal with all that.
Yeah. Faith doesn't always give us clear answers. Sometimes it asks more of us than we want to give. And the hardest stretches when nothing made sense. How did you keep believing without losing yourself?
Well, God has spoken to me like clearly twice in my life. And, we all have our spirit and the intuition and the things that like give us from our knower, like the little, still small voice. But the night of my husband's conviction was the first time that I ever really like heard from God outside of that still small voice. So it was a terrible day. I mean, like I kind of like got blips of it. I don't even remember every piece of it because it's so traumatic. But we get home that night and like I said, I'm, very stoic. I'm not a big emotion sharer. So I go to my shower to go have a big meltdown because like even only being in a house with my mom, I needed to have a private meltdown. So I go and I'm in the shower and I'm like kind of railing at God and I'm like, you said it would be okay. And he very clear to said to me, I did not say when. And I was in that moment furious. I'm like, but you told me it was going to be okay and blah, blah, blah. And so I really had that stuck in my head and I was so angry. But then, I wake up 3 years later, 4 years later, 5 years later, 5.5 years later, and I could keep going because I was so clear. He's like, I didn't say when. I'm like, all right. So I'll just keep going because it's coming. I just don't know when. And it was having like that level of clarity from him. And I don't mean to be discouraging for anybody who hasn't received that level of clarity, but has to be relentless in something that takes for years. But he did allow me that gift, absolute clarity in that moment where it was the present voice of God. And it was not the message that I wanted to hear. It was not a sweet pat you on the head situation. It wasn't like, I love you. It was like, this is going to suck for a long time. Hang in there. And I'm like, okay. But I will say that unshakable. I like unshakable that this is going to be okay. And I don't know what that definition is. And I don't know when it's coming. But God made a very clear promise to me.
Wow. It reminds me of a song by Incubus called If Not Now When.
Oh,
you heard of it?
Yeah, I love Incubus. Straight up my 90s, late 2000s soul is like, yeah, baby.
I used to listen to that song because, you know a little bit of my journey, and I would listen to that song and say, this is like, if not now, when? When are you going to just take over my life, or just turn this thing around, you know what I mean?
And then the same thing for me, there was a song called Even If You Don't, so I can't remember who did that one, but it was a guy who was talking about their journey with a child who was medically fragile. And he was talking about like, hey, even if you don't answer my prayer, I'm still going to love you and praise you. So I had that one like really just like kind of ingrained into my like, even if.
Yeah, I'm going to look for that song.
It's a good one.
You've walked through systems that were supposed to protect you, but often added more weight. After everything you've lived through, how do you define justice now, and where does mercy fit into that?
Well, that's a really great question. So there's like justice conceptually, and then there's our justice system, and sadly, they're just two different things. So there's true justice, and people know what justice looks like. I mean, we know what justice looks like. And I think so many of us expect that our justice systems reflect actual justice. And there might be a lot of situations in which they do, but sadly, we've become really aware that our justice system is kind of less than. And like in a bunch of different areas of our country since the founding, 250 years ago, that we are veering hard left on a lot of these systems and institutions. We need to bring it back in, and there has to be accountability. And I think that just to get a little political for a second, we've seen over the last few years during these election cycles and the politicization of justice and about, charges charges everybody. Everybody's committed mortgage fraud. Apparently everybody and their mother commits mortgage fraud on both sides of the aisle because that's what they get people for. And we really need to take a look at like what we're doing in our justice systems and what the accountability is for that. Like there is not nearly enough accountability with prosecutors. There's not nearly enough accountability with judges. I mean, the judge in our case was, laughable. He'd have to be woken to rule on objections. I mean, he was, before the trial even started, he said the Iraqis have waited long enough for justice. I mean, things that should cause somebody to recuse themselves aren't even a wrist slap. I mean, it's just, there's no accountability there whatsoever. So as far as justice goes, there's the actual justice system in our country, and it needs way more accountability, way more oversight. Like we're going to have to tackle that as a country and get that figured out. But God teaches us about true justice. And there are things that are going to happen in this world that are unjust. And there are going to be things that happen in everybody's life that are unjust, unfair, inequitable. And that's one of the things I talk to our daughter about, and my husband does as well. Like life is just not fair. Being worried about being fair and being equitable and all these things is just like not. But that's where mercy comes. And that's where like the Lord's mercy comes, that even if your life is not fair and ours has not been fair, that God shows up in such merciful, grace-filled ways and gives us the example that even if our life's unfair, that we then need to turn around and be merciful and acknowledge those things in our life and not take it as entitlement. Well, my life wasn't fair, so I can act like this. It's like, no, well, your life wasn't fair, so you know why you shouldn't act like that. And so he's done a lot in our hearts about mercy and real justice and turning around and being somebody who shows mercy because we've received it. But then on that note, it's also very strange receiving a presidential pardon, because presidential pardons are forgiveness or mercy, but there was no underlying crime. So it's like being forgiven for a crime you didn't commit. And what you want is real justice. You want exoneration. You want your name to be cleared. And so there may be pathways for that for us. We're still kind of like trying to figure that out. But a presidential pardon is mercy for something you didn't do, which is strange.
That's interesting. I was going to ask you what you thought about, how you see the pardon and the things, the people that were in that space during that time. After all the grief, rebuilding and rising again, when the noise finally fades, what still feels sacred to you?
The relationship with the Lord that I don't know that I would have gotten otherwise. Like I understood God on like this conceptual level, but I didn't have a relationship with Jesus Christ. And walking through this process, I developed that relationship, and you could take everything away from me now, my marriage, my child, my home, but there is a gift that I was given through the adversity of this process that cannot be taken. And if I hadn't gone through it, I wouldn't even know I was missing it. You know what I mean? Like I thought me and God, we're cool. I understand it. I read my Bible. I go to church on Sunday. Like I'm a good person, but didn't realize that I didn't have the deep relationship with Christ. Just didn't know what I didn't know. And I thought this was kind of like something other people were kind of like making up or something. I don't know. I didn't know how we were all experiencing this. But that was like the gift that can never be taken away. And then also the gift of realizing that when you have a relationship with the Lord, that you don't have to be performance driven. And so you can be imperfect and sinful and a mess and broken in all of those different ways. And that's okay. Because like when you have a real relationship with the Lord and understand the gift of real mercy, you don't have to be perfect and performative anymore. And that was like, I'm achievement driven. So that has been the biggest thing, that when it gets really, really quiet, I know I have the Lord, and I know I don't have to be perfect, even if I've messed things up. What's for me is for me, and what's not for me is not for me.
That's beautiful. As your friend, I'm seeing the whole, like the flower blossom, with everything, your story, the book, coming on podcasts. And you did your first speaking engagement with regards to this, right? How does it feel to see these things starting to, like, your experience is taking a different shape, and it's you're telling the story in a different way, and something that people can hold on to?
Gigantic imposter syndrome. So it's kind of felt like we're supposed to tell this story, right? Like you're supposed to talk about it, and you're supposed to do these things. And I want to. And at the same time, because like for this whole situation, we've always had to battle for attention, battle the misconceptions, battle all these things and go uphill. And sometimes it feels a little strange, like, should I fight uphill to tell this story? Or do I just want to like let it be?
Yeah, yeah.
So giant imposter syndrome, it's like you kind of, it's like when people ask me to tell my story, like I'm so excited about it, but I don't want to like go create opportunities for me to sell my story, right? Or to tell my story. And so it's like that weird in between where it kind of feels like an imposter. It's like, oh, well, if you have to ask to tell your story, like, does anybody really want to hear it? So I'm struggling. I'm just kind of struggling with like what that really looks like on the back end.
Yeah. I can see where you're coming from with that, where you have to ask people you want to hear my story?
Yeah, like that's weird.
Yeah,
so it's like, so it's more just trying to figure out, it's like, where do I fit in? Who wants to actually hear this? Because it's like, if people want to hear it, I want to talk about it, but I'm definitely not like, here, let me expose off my trauma for you. Like, no, like, would you enjoy that? It's like, no, like if there is something that's inspiring here, like I want to talk about it. But yeah, trying to make those opportunities for yourself is very strange.
If you had a book, this will be the last question. If you had a book that was about your journey, right? What, your journey in this, just in general, right? Like what would be the title of the book?
I don't know. If I had to just come up with one word, I would just say relentless.
Relentless. Okay.
But that's probably a really good book name. So it's probably already out there somewhere.
Yeah. Well, you should write a book for sure. Everyone always says, Rush, when are you going to write a book? I would say, Christin, when are you going to write a book?
I know. I hear the same thing. I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I'm not much of a writer. And again, struggling with like, do people actually care?
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess I have to work through that.
Yeah. I'm excited for you. I'm excited to see all the things that are up ahead, ahead for you and your family. And finally, not only the peace, joy, but the happiness of going through this journey with Christ and with each other, and the rewards of that suffering come to fruition. So I'm very excited for you, and it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast today,
Thank you.
Christin.
I loved it.
I love you, and I love you and your husband and your family, and we're excited to have you on the podcast. And that's a wrap.
That's a wrap.
All right, guys, that's it for the Rush Outrospective, a Master in the Art of Living podcast. As I always say, have peace and light in you, and remember that the ocean refuses no river.
Community in motion. Every story that I hear teaches me the language of the soul, the language we all share. I balanced on a tightrope of ego, but now I walk the floor where connection becomes purpose, and purpose opens doors. No crown to win alone, no kingdom built in isolation. We thrive when we're united, that's our true elevation. So I lift my voice for the collective, for the ones who can't be heard. We